So, Dr. Phil, thank you for joining me today. And where are you right now?
Dallas, Texas.
Oh, you're in Dallas. I lived in Dallas for 4 years too. So,
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
yeah, it's a great city. It's blossomed a lot since I was there too. But
Yes, it has.
I'm grateful to you for the time taking to talk to me today. But I'm also just wanted to acknowledge the work and the commitment you've put into helping people navigate through this extraordinary time that's taken a huge toll on the mental well-being of many people around the world, obviously.
Well,
And so,
doctor, it really has. It's been just a terrible time. It's nothing I've ever seen in my life, I can tell you that.
yeah, I said that to my kid. I have 4 kids, and I said that to them. I said, "You guys are going through something that, I'm 50, and I'm still like going, wow, this is a lot to deal with. So, what's it like for teenagers and younger adults and obviously kids?" One of the findings from a recent American Psychological Association survey found that over 50% of people are feeling quite a lot of fear right now but it's not actually related to the virus. It's related to going back into the world, going back into the workforce. And so you've made a distinction, I know, throughout the years between fear and anxiety. But to those people who are feeling, pretty anxious and stressed about going back to restaurants, traveling, what advice do you have for them?
Well, I think we have to really look at what people are dealing with and how much of it is rational and how much of it is not. And the truth is, we find security in predictability. And there's so much now that people can't predict because they really don't know what's out there. And, people, particularly economists, have talked about this pent up appetite for getting back into the world. And a lot of people have described it kind of like it was going to be like that scene from Greece where school's out and they kick the doors open and all the kids come running out at the end to the carnival and they're singing and dancing. Like that's what it's going to be like when this quarantine finally ends. But it's quite the opposite, because during this last year, and who thought we would be here a year later still talking about this, but during this last year, everyone's world has gotten much, much smaller. And things we took for granted before, social interaction, competition, and I'm not just talking about competition in academics or whatever, but competition of just getting out into the job market and interacting with people. Those things that we took for granted, we just are intimidated by now. People just don't really know if they're going to be able to handle that. And so I think people are really scared about it and wondering whether or not that's something that they're going to be able to be equal to, or have their skills eroded. Are they going to have jobs? Are they going to be able to really interact? And so I think that this is really a rational fear that people have. And so I think they're concerned about it and really well should be.
Well, when you talk about irrational fear, obviously where our apprehension is and lack of ease is disproportionate to the threat, if there's any threat. So there's it's not necessarily rational. The risk factor is going down at the moment as vaccines roll out and as cases go down. And yet, obviously, many people are still pretty anxious about getting out there. Where I live, there's a lot of people out in the bars and restaurants, and I certainly am comfortable going out, but I know many are uncomfortable. So is it valuable for people to sort of make peace with the discomfort and just embrace that?
I think it is. And I think you have to really ask yourself, I think monsters live in the dark. And I think if you actually talk about it and ask yourself what your personal situation is for you and your family, have you been vaccinated? Are you aware of what the situation is in your community in terms of how rampant how rampant the virus is, how much of a vaccination penetration there has been in your community, and what the real risks are to you if you were to get the vaccine, if you were to get the virus. And I think when people really talk it through and realize, look, this is not such a devastating situation. if we really look at what has happened in our community. We're not talking about the world. We're not in India here. If you're in Wisconsin, if you're in Texas, if you're in DC, you might be reading what's happening in India right now, which is very tragic, but that's not what's happening here. The statistics for those that have had at least one vaccination are very high. You add to that those that have natural antibodies because they've had the virus, and so they have the natural antibodies. The truth is, it's really quite safe right now. And I really, I live in California and Texas, and I think some of these communities are really dragging their feet because they just don't know how to get back into the world. And I think we need to get back out there.
Yeah.
And it's the mixed messages that I think has created a lot of confusion for people. So I think they need to be thoughtful about sorting it out and realize it is time to get back out there. Be careful, continue to maintain hygiene and do the things that you need to do. But I think it's time to get back out there, because I think the damage that comes from prolonged quarantine really outstrips the risk that you face right now from the virus. I think we're going to be seeing the devastation from this prolonged quarantine for decades to come, particularly with our children. I think the fallout from this, we're going to be looking at the devastation of this for decades to come for these children.
Now, obviously, that's multi-pronged. One aspect of that is the mental health side of things, but obviously for children, it's also just missed education, but actually missed social development too. They haven't been in school for some kids well over a year, and so they've missed out on all of that, just very vital development. But when it comes to, you just mentioned then about the impact being around for decades to come. In the analysis post the 1918 flu epidemic, there was obviously, there was signs now we know of post-traumatic stress disorder, but there was also the Roaring Twenties. There was this flourishing and this blossoming. And I think, those two things can happen in parallel. But I guess in my work, I like to kind of focus in on what can we do to create more of the positive and to create the phenomena of post-traumatic growth. How can we use these difficult times to actually bounce forward? And what do you think people can do to help themselves come out the other side of this, not in worse shape, but in better shape, in terms of their own experience of life and resiliency and ability to cope with life's stresses?
Well, first off, I've often said you can't change what you don't acknowledge. And there is such a stigma around mental health. And I've tried to fight that stigma for the last 25 years on the air. And, that's why I was part of this Congressional Mental Health Caucus with Congresswoman Napolitano and Congressman Cato from New York. Because I think if we acknowledge this, if we give it a voice, if we recognize if we need help, whether it's a support group or a church group or just talking with our friends and family about it, as I said, monsters live in the dark. If you label this, then it's not nearly so scary. And I know I've talked to so many families that the quarantine, they've turned it into a positive because they had the time to do things they never had time to do before. You hear people saying, I work so much, I don't get quality time with my children. They've actually used this to create that quality time with their children. And so positives have come from this as well as negatives. But okay, now that we're going back out, and I think those people, if you're really smart, there is going to be some intimidation out there. Things are going to be maybe slow rolling out. This is a great time to seize opportunities. I think about it like being at a NASCAR race and everybody else is in the pits. This is a great time for you to have an open track and really get out there and organize your thoughts, organize your goals, and really seize an opportunity to step out there and distinguish yourself by being ready and making yourself vital in your job, getting back involved in your social situations. And if you really stop and think about it, you can do that. Have the confidence of factual information, factual knowledge, know that you're not being reckless, and and really change your internal dialogue. If you're talking to yourself about fear, anxiety, intimidation, change your internal dialogue so you'll change your physiology, you'll change your social interactions, and seize the opportunity to really make up some lost ground here. And I think it's a great opportunity for people to get some traction in their lives. This is a chance to get a do-over. Hit the restart button, relaunch your life, and do some things that maybe you wish you had done before. It's a great time to restart.
Yeah, you've talked about how we should give what we most want, give away what you want. And it kind of aligns with something I think is like, be the kind of friend you'd want to have, be the kind of co-worker you'd want to have. And as people start thinking about going even back into offices, well, what kind of person would you want to have be going back to? How can you reach out and establish connections and be positive and be fun and find fun ways of making the adjustment? When it comes to people reintegrating socially with others, I think some people have lost social practice. And I think, depending on your personality type, obviously impacts that as well. Small steps, obviously, but what are some practical things people can do, just to kind of help themselves ease back into it?
Here's the thing. We don't have to leap tall buildings in a single bound, right? So your first outing doesn't need to be to a concert. You don't have to say, okay, I'm going to go from quarantine to a rock concert where you're in the middle of 15,000 people. If that's too much for you, okay, that's all right. Start out with small gathering, maybe people to your backyard to have a barbecue or something like that. Practice those skills that you took for granted before. And I promise you, the best predictor of future behavior is relevant past behavior. Well, our relevant past behavior for the last year has been rather asocial in a small world. But you've got 30 years, 40 years of prior history that predicts social interaction, social success. That will kick in and take over. Give yourself a chance to do this a step at a time. Start with some small outings for lunch or dinner. If you're more comfortable doing it outside because you're aware that that's less risky than being indoors, then do that. But schedule yourself. I think the difference between a dream and a goal is a timeline and accountability. So if you want to get back to full speed, set a goal and say, I'm going to have a social interaction this week with 3 or 4 people. Next week, I'm going to get involved with a larger group, and I'm going to get a friend, and we're going to hold each other accountable. Friday, did you do it this week? Yes, I did. What are you going to do next week? Well, we're going to do this. Let's do it together. Maybe you start out walking on a track at the high school and you're visiting with people. Next time you go to dinner somewhere. Next time you're going to a worship service that maybe you've been attending virtually. You just do successive approximations to the ultimate goal of getting back in. And in a matter of a very short time, I promise your history will kick in and you'll be right back where you were. But resolve to do it with a new attitude, a new zeal, a new excitement. I think this is a great opportunity for people to relaunch.
Yeah, no, a saying I learned growing up on a farm riding horses was growth and comfort can't ride the same horse. And
exactly.
I think right now, a lot of people are feeling a bit nervous and scared, but as John Wayne said, saddle up anyway and just get out there. And I think the more often people sort of act with the confidence and the courage they wish they had, that you kind of build it like a muscle, like going to the gym. And so start small, but start.
And it depends on how you frame it. Some people might say you're saying fake it till you make it. I don't believe that's what it is. I think winners do things losers don't want to do. And sometimes you just have to behave your way to success. You say, winners do things losers don't want to do. And winners are going to take initiative. Winners are going to engage. Winners are going to get out of their comfort zone and challenge themselves to go to the next level. And if it's uncomfortable for you, that's okay.
Yeah.
You need to stretch yourself. You need to get out of that comfort zone. And if we only did things that were comfortable, we'd all repeat the 3rd grade 10 times. That's comfortable. You need to go to the next level. You need to challenge yourself to do something that stretches you. And I think if people will do that and realize that's not reckless, it's just stretching myself a bit.
Yeah.
And, you know, I did a series of conversations with Dr. John White, the chief medical officer at WebMD, about when it came New Year's, to do different kinds of resolutions this time, to do exactly what you and I are talking about now. Action-oriented, useful, common sense re-emerging, where we said, all right, I'm just going to challenge myself to go to that next level. And it was amazing how people responded to that. Don't judge yourself, just say, I'm going to take that next step, one foot in front of the other. And it's time to do that. Don't you think, doctor, it's time for people to get out there and
Yeah,
stretch
you bet.
themselves and do what they need to do?
Oh, you bet. Well, I think of a quote that Sister Joan Chittister said, and she said, you know, some people in the hurly-burly of life can miss out on life itself. Well, I would say right now that some people right now are living so safely and so cautiously that they miss out on life itself. And
They do.
there was this time 12 months ago, there was a much more reason for caution and prudence, but right now, like, life is to be lived. And I think that making peace with discomfort and just getting out there is the best thing any of us can do.
And you have to watch your children, and you know there are warning signs with your children. If your children are showing signs of depression, anxiety, loneliness, that's going to show up in them being more withdrawn, them being fussy, or them showing signs of regression to earlier stages of development. And if you see that, if you see them varying from the baseline that you know they functioned at before, recognize that. And whether we're educators or parents or politicians, we need to lead with compassion. And in order to do that, we need to listen, because we don't know what people's experience has been through the pandemic. I mean, I know what mine has been because I was there, but I don't know what a coworker's has been. I don't know if they've lived in a 4-wall apartment with a small window and have really gotten cabin fever. You know, I don't really know. And we can fight the stigma by talking about these things, inviting people to talk about them. And if we see that they're intimidated or that their children are kind of regress to a less social way, then we can really help them by inviting them to come out and say, look, let me help you with this. Let's get together. Let's do this together. My children are perhaps more adjusted with this at this point. Why don't you come over and play with our kids? You know, help your neighbor, listen, be compassionate, and lead by example. Don't judge. That will really help overcome the stigma if we just don't judge and instead lead by example.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, our kids don't always listen to what we say, but they always see what we do.
Oh, isn't that the truth? They're always watching.
And I think right now is an opportunity for parents. I mean, we're the ultimate leaders, to really show up in a way that, you know, what are the values you want to instill in your children right now? And how do you want them to respond and be thinking about, you know, going back into the world and going back to school? And if you're optimistic and can do, and we'll figure this out and we'll get through this together, and it's a bit uncomfortable, but we're gonna be brave. I think that it just sets your kids up to thrive and get out there themselves. But you know, the worst thing parents can do, if they're living in fear, it seeps right down into their kids, which does them such a disservice.
Well, the most powerful role model in any child's life is the same-sex parent. The second most powerful role model is the other sex parent. So those parents are so powerful. And as you say, they watch. And if they see the parent being anxious and experiencing so much trepidation, they take those cues. Even if you're not saying it, they watch what you do. They watch if you don't engage. They watch if you don't race back to work. And they take those cues. But if you lead by example and show them that, look, I trust this, it's okay, they will take those cues. And they're going to be maybe nervous about going back to school. You know, talk to them about that. Let them voice their fears about it. And we always say discuss things with children in age-appropriate ways, but nobody ever defines what that really means. I want to tell you how to define what that means. listen to what they say, listen to the words they use in their questions, and that's the level you engage at. If their questions say, what's the epidemiological impact of the coronavirus? That's one level. If they say, am I going to get sick if I go to school? That's another level. Meet them where they are. Don't ask them to meet you where you are. Meet them at that level and discuss it at that level and give them the assurances that they need and encourage them, make it fun, and let them be excited about being back with their friends.
Yeah.
And I've talked to some of the kids. I sat in a restaurant yesterday here in Dallas with 3 teachers at a private school that never went virtual. They stayed in school, in class the whole time.
Good for them.
And they were so excited, and they said their kids are thriving and just doing great. And I was so excited to hear that from these 3 women sitting next to me. They were so anxious to tell me that they feel like their kids have such an edge. The kids in their class have such an edge right now. But they're so excited to see the rest of the kids coming back to school now. So
yeah,
some
awesome.
of these places didn't shut down. They stayed open.
Yeah, awesome. And those kids, honestly, the difference of experience they've had versus many. I think one of the things you started out, just kind of bringing this full circle, talking about how we love predictability. We want certainty, and we haven't had that now for quite some time. And I think in terms of reducing the anxiety regarding uncertainty is just trying to eliminate as many unknowns as possible. So for parents with kids, do a test run, go back and walk the school grounds, just help to reduce those unknowns, I think is going to be very helpful to them.
I think parents and kids alike need to realize, and it's kind of my interpretation or a broad application of self-attribution theory, and it's not exactly what it means, but it's how I apply it in this situation. But we learn about ourselves the same way we learn about other people. If we work with somebody and across the years, we notice that they're the first one there every day, they turn the lights on, they have the coffee made, it can rain or snow, doesn't matter, they're there every day. You attribute certain traits to them, right? They're reliable, they're dependable, they're always there. And so we observe that and we assign traits to them. That's exactly how we form our own self-esteem, our own self-image. We observe what we do, and based on what we see ourselves do, we attribute certain competencies or traits to ourselves. And that's why I say if you overindulge children and you cheat them out of mastery of their environment, they don't learn what they can do. And if children now observe themselves getting back out there, observe themselves playing a kickball game, observe themselves going to a birthday party, they'll say, hey, I can do this. I saw myself do it last week. Their self-esteem, their self-confidence, it will ratchet up so fast, but you've got to give them the chance to observe themselves mastering their environment again. Adults and children alike, they've got to have a chance to see themselves do it, and then they'll go, wow, I got this. And it's so important to do that so you can observe yourself doing it.
Yeah, that's so true. It aligns with a very short maxim: first do, then believe.
Exactly.
Yeah. Take the action, then you'll catch up and go, I can do it. So, well, look, Dr. Phil, I am so grateful to you for your time and your insight, your wisdom, and obviously your commitment to helping people thrive. And I just want to say thank you so much. And I look forward to sharing your knowledge with my audience. And
listen, I love your optimism, I love your energy, and I love the fact that you look for the positive stepping stones to get people back into the world. I'm so glad to meet you and hear your point of view.
Oh, it's my honor, very honored. Thank you. Hope to meet you in person one day.
Me too, and we'll have to do this again.
That would be wonderful. All right, take care. God bless.
Thanks so much.